Why do we want what we want? It's a question that echoes in the quietest, most private parts of our lives. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain, step past the poetry, and into the lab to decode the fundamental and, let's be honest, often painful wiring of human desire.
Now this isn't a line from some movie, it's from a real letter. A real woman writing to an advice columnist, describing a crisis that had completely taken over her marriage. We're starting here because this one desperate plea grounds everything we're about to explore in a very, very real human problem.
7. That's how many years this had been going on. For 7 years, the woman who wrote that letter said her husband had slept with her just once. His reason? He was in his 50s and things just stopped working. You can just feel the weight of that, the rejection, the confusion, the quiet anger. So what is really happening in a situation like this? Can desire just vanish? Or is it possible that men and women are operating from two completely different playbooks, written in two different languages? Well, the science has an answer. So let's dive in and follow the data. To really understand this conflict, we have to start at the source code. The very first step is to look at our fundamental biological wiring. Because when it comes to desire, it turns out timing is everything. Okay, first things first, let's get our terms straight. We talk about libido like it's a specific organ or some switch you can just flip on or off. But it's not. It's really just a concept, a way for us to measure our sex drive, which is actually a pretty complex cocktail of hormones like testosterone and our own unique psychology. And this is where things get really interesting. This timeline, it maps out a critical divergence. If you look at age 11, things are pretty much even between boys and girls. But then, by age 15, a massive surge of testosterone sends the average boy into what is probably the most hypersexual stage of his entire life. Meanwhile, for a lot of women, that full sexual peak often doesn't arrive until they're in their 30s. And this right here creates a fundamental, almost tragic biological mismatch. It's not about blame, not at all. It's just about timing. Right as many women are hitting their absolute sexual peak, many men are starting that first slow and totally natural decline from their teenage high point. And that creates a gap that can define a relationship for decades. So we have the biological blueprint, but how does that actually translate into our psychology? Into how we think and feel? Because it's not just when we want sex that's different, it's how that desire even gets switched on in the first place. This slide just illustrates it perfectly. It's based on findings from social psychologist Roy Baumeister. He found that for most men, desire is, spontaneous and surprisingly consistent. It's there at the beginning of a relationship, it's there in the middle, and it's there years later. But for women, it's way more complex. Research shows it's incredibly sensitive to the context, the environment, and especially the emotional landscape of the relationship. One researcher put it in a way that I think is just perfect. This metaphor really captures the heart of the divide. For a lot of men, the trigger for desire can be simple, direct, like a single paragraph. But for many women, it requires a whole narrative, a story, a plot that's been building over time. And this difference, it has real, measurable consequences. Check this out. When researchers asked couples about their last sexual encounter, the results were, pretty telling. 75% of the men said they reached orgasm. For women, that number was a stark 25%. That's not just a gap. That highlights a profound disconnect in the actual physical experience of sex. But this all leads to a really fascinating question. Is this complexity in female desire a conscious thing, or is there something deeper, maybe even subconscious, going on? A pretty remarkable study decided to find out. Okay, so get this. At Northwestern University, researchers hooked up participants to devices that measured actual genital blood flow, a direct physical sign of arousal, while they watched different kinds of erotic films. The straight men? Totally predictable. They said they were turned on by women, and yep, their bodies confirmed it. But the women? Now, they said they were most aroused by male-female sex, but their bodies told a completely different story, showing physical arousal to pretty much everything, including male-male and female-female scenes. So the conclusion from the researchers was incredibly powerful. Men, it seems, tend to be very rigid, very specific in what arouses them. Women, on the other hand, on a purely biological level, appear to be more open, more fluid, with a much broader capacity for arousal across a wider spectrum, even if they don't consciously recognize it or act on it. So we've got the biology, we have the psychology, we have the physical response. Now let's put it all together. It's time for the final piece of the puzzle, the one that connects all this data and takes us right back to that couple we started with. A huge study in the British Medical Journal uncovered something absolutely critical about why desire fades in long-term relationships. It found that women were more than twice as likely as men to report losing interest in sex over time. We're talking a full 34% of women versus just 15% of men. So what was the number one reason they gave? It wasn't aging. It wasn't a biological issue. It was a lack of emotional closeness with their partner. So after all the timelines and the charts and the lab studies, the science brings us to this. This is the crucial point. The synthesis of everything we've looked at can be boiled down to this one profound sentence. It suggests that men and women are often using sex to say two completely different things in two completely different languages.
And that brings us right back to that letter. All that frustration, the anger, the 7 years of silence. For that couple and for so many others, maybe the problem isn't a lack of love or a body that's failed. Maybe it's just a failure to translate. And that leaves us with one final thought. Could truly, deeply understanding this one simple sentence be the key to finally bridging that divide?